This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Wadandi people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
But I was driving down Caves Road. There were arum lilies just sprouting up on the sides of the road. But I started crying with happiness. I was like, I'm here, I'm in Margaret River. And I still love it.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.
Leah Clearwater is the business manager of Overstory Wine, but to pigeonhole her into one role seems sacrilegious. So instead, I'll let her tell you more about her wonderful world and the many hats that she wears. Hi Leah, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
When I was looking up some information about your brand and you, it kept coming up with Twilight series.
I know.
And the Wolf Girl.
Yes, the werewolf Leah Clearwater. So when the Twilight series first came out, I had numerous people contacting me on Facebook saying, did you change your name? I'm like, no, I'm blonde hair, blue-eyed.
I'm not a werewolf.
Not a werewolf, not Native American, and I'm not a Twilight fan. I mean, it's okay, but yeah.
I struggled to kind of say what you do. You've done so much in your career. You are, like I said, you wear so many hats. Tell me about how you got started in this whole business. Let's go right back to the beginning, not the day you were born, but, you know, when you were starting to, get pimples and, start to think about what you wanted out of life.
Well, when I had pimples and I was thinking about what I wanted out of life, I thought I was going to be a celebrated Australian artist. So I was a bit of a romantic. Headed off from country New South Wales down to Sydney with big dreams. Went to the City Art Institute in New South Wales, which is now part of New South Wales University. Quickly realised that I was a bit more of an academic and had a part-time job at a vintage cellars in Beecroft in Sydney. And I looked forward to going into work in the wine shop. And we had a lot of serious wine buyers coming in, and we'd get allocations of, Grange and wine from overseas. And I'd always just been so fascinated with wine that after I finished my fine arts degree, and couldn't get a job, obviously. I mean, not so easy in fine arts. I decided to head off and study viticulture and enology. And that's where I found it was my true passion. I still love being creative. I love writing. I've done lots of studies in English literature, but my passion was in wine. But I also soon realised, I've had a lot of realisations throughout my career. I went to uni I was like, right, I'm going to be a winemaker. I'm going to be one of those, international winemaking women that's on the cover of magazines, and got there. And my first lecture in chemistry, I felt like they were speaking in another language. Honestly, I just could not wrap my head around chemistry. So ended up focusing more on the viticultural side of things, and found that that's where my interest lay, actually, was in wine production out in the vineyard. Yeah, so that whole winemaking dream went to the side, and I focused on viticulture.
Well, viticulture in its essence, is pretty creative and fascinating if you were kind of an English lit student, and it's still quite romantic. But it also takes a lot of brains to understand viticulture. And you went on to do your PhD in viticulture too.
Yes, over in the States. I think viticulture, like winemaking, it's a huge component of it is obviously science, but a very big part of it is intuition and things that can't be taught out of a book or from a lecture. And I learnt that when I first started working out in vineyards was, you can profile the soil, you can do soil tests, you can do plant nutrient analysis tests, but you've got to have that intuition, that green thumb, if you like, which my grandmother always had, in order to sort of read the plants, read the vines, how they're doing, even things like water stress. You get a feel for it over the years. You can walk into a block and see the angle of the petiole from the shoot and go, that needs a bit of water, So it is quite a sensory sort of part of production as well, just as winemaking is. Some of the best winemakers in the world are those that follow instinct and just the sensory components, the romance, the part of terroir that the French say is a mystery. It's not just the soil and the climate and all the physical elements, but that part that's imparted by how you feel and what you intuit out of things. Yeah.
Yeah, the unfathomable or the undescribable, which in essence is the romance of it all. Take me back though, first of all, where in New South Wales were you originally from?
From Kempsey. It's a little town, mid-north coast.
I know where Kempsey is.
Near Port Macquarie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very small town. But yeah, I have fond memories of growing up there. It was, had a really good childhood, riding motorbikes, horses, getting on the horses and, just a really innocent childhood. And then when I took off to Sydney, it was pretty eye-opening.
I think that so many people that end up loving land have usually come from, big open spaces. And I just think that it kind of comes full circle in the end. You think, oh God, I want to go to the city where things are happening and I'm from this tiny town. But in the end, you gravitate back towards, I want to, be able to breathe fresh air and see large open spaces and be able to, like you said, get on a bike and ride off into the sunset. I
think that's true. I think I've always been, no matter where I've lived, I've always been called back to the land, and particularly land near the ocean. And that's why I love being in the Margaret River region. You've got everything. You've got the beautiful native landscape here, but the coastline is just amazing. I don't think I'd move anywhere else now that I've lived here. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, you don't need to tell me twice. I am such a big fan. I never want to leave. But tell me about, why did you decide to study viticulture in New Zealand?
I was married to a Kiwi at the time. We were living in Sydney. I'd finished my art degree and he wanted to go back to New Zealand, and I looked up the undergraduate degree course. It was the first year they were actually running the course at Lincoln University, the bachelor's degree in viticulture and enology. So, so I joined that, which was really incredible experience to be part of a first year deliverance of a bachelor degree program. So all the lecturers were new. It was all very exciting. And we were kind of guinea pigs, I suppose. But yeah, came out, graduated from that, and I met my supervisor for my postgraduate studies while I was in New Zealand at Lincoln University. He was on sabbatical, Professor Stanley Howell, who's since passed. And I won a scholarship to do a research project with him at the University Vineyard at Lincoln University, and we got along so well. He became not only my mentor in viticulture, but a mentor in life. He became like a second father figure, larger than life guy, looked like Santa Claus, had a big barreling laugh. And anyway, I was working in New Zealand after finishing my bachelor's degree at Pegasus Bay Vineyard, just doing some hard yakka, as you have to, cut your teeth out there and learn what's what. And he contacted me one day and said, I want you to come over to Michigan State University, of all places. Most people don't even realise that they grow grapes in Michigan, and help him set up an undergraduate degree program there, which I thought was crazy. I mean, I'd only just finished mine, but he must have seen something in me. So my then husband and I moved over to America so that I could do my postgraduate studies. It was a big move. We lived in Michigan. I did a lot of joint research with UC Davis, different projects over there, and became very academic, I suppose, at the time, lecturing and writing lectures and doing research out in the vineyards, all kinds of things, really. But it was an amazing time in my life to go and live in America and study over there.
Gosh, tell me about the first lecture that you ever did and what was your kind of mindset going in? Were you nervous? Were you confident? What was it like?
Well, if you ask my parents, they'll say I'm a bit of a natural show-off. So even when you invited me to join this, I was like, sure, yeah. I was always fascinated by, I've always been a bit of an amateur thespian, so I don't mind standing up and speaking to people. I don't know if it comes from arrogance or I just like to entertain people. And I love teaching. I think there's something amazing about imparting information in a way that's palatable to people and all different people. I think you can be very academic. You can have a very intrinsic understanding of something, but being able to help someone else understand it is a true skill that I learnt from Professor Stanhow. I watched him, I learnt from him, and he just took everything back to grassroots, even if it was a really complex problem, or you're teaching somebody about photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 and photosynthesis. He would just pare it all right back and make it easier for people to grasp. And yeah, I really love teaching and taking the students out into the vineyard, because the course was very hands-on as well. We would get the students out to help us with a master's degree and PhD program research projects. So, yeah, no, loved it.
I feel like if you were lecturing some of my university lectures, I wouldn't have fallen asleep in them as much. So,
oh, that's a nice compliment.
It is. And just a little, many, many years too late.
I think it's also just being, like, if you're truly passionate about something and you're excited about it, that becomes contagious. I don't know how you feel, but when you're sitting there listening to a lecture and you can tell that person is actually really interested in their topic. They're not just delivering, I have to deliver this part of the curriculum, but they're actually interested in it. You can't help but engage in it, one of my favourite topics to teach people is soil science, it's particularly for grape growing, and turning dirt into something interesting is not always easy, but I just think it's fascinating what's below the ground. I mean, we often focus on what the vine looks like, the fruit to leaf ratio, and is the fruit shaded, and what's the crop load, and we focus on the vines. But really that underground world of what's actually supporting the vine fascinates me. No end, and particularly the soils of Margaret River, which I think are some of the most unique in the world.
Definitely. I was in the city the other day in Sydney, and I was looking at this huge, massive oak tree that was completely covered right up to its base in concrete. And I was just there thinking, how do you survive? You've got no soil other than what's underneath and all your root systems, and you're all this pollution, and that you're this magnificent oak tree. And all I could think of is everything that was going down underneath the roots. And then I missed my bus and thought, I need to get with it. But tell me a bit about when you decided, when you were finished in America, did you go to Italy kind of on a jaunt? Was that while you were still lecturing? Where did Italy come into the mix?
Italy came into the mix because, how personal can I get? My Kiwi husband and I split up while we were in the States. He went back to New Zealand and I was at a bit of a loss. Finished my postgraduate studies, thought, what am I going to do? Do I go back with my tail between my legs? Not that my tail should be between my legs, but I just sort of felt lost a little bit. So I'd never been to Italy, always had the desire to go there, and I just took off and ended up doing some consulting in Cortona because I'd had that academic background. I went and lived in Cortona in Tuscany for a while and had very rudimentary grasp on the Italian language, but could get by conversationally. The trouble came when I was out trying to work with the people working in the vineyards. Faced a fair bit of sexism, like, who's this woman coming in here to tell us what to do? It was challenging, to say the least. So I sort of had that gig for a while. And then I decided, no, I think I should head back to Australia. But I stayed in Italy for a while and had a very good time, to say the least. Spent all my savings.
I'm really glad to hear that you did a bit of eat, pray, love vibe while you were there.
I did. I went and stayed in Florence for a few months and just went a bit silly. But I'll never regret it. I'll look back on that time and think that was just amazing. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's a rite of passage that you need to get a little bit silly at some point in your life. So tell me, the GFC had a big impact. Is that when you moved back to Australia?
No, so I was already in Australia. So I'd moved to the Margaret River region. I had worked with a consulting company based in Dunsborough for a number of years and then decided to go out on my own and have my own consulting business. So I had quite a few clients. My business was going really well. And then when the GFC hit, as you can imagine, when you're doing your budget, and you're in trouble, there's a glut of fruit and you can't sell all of your wine, one of the first things to go is going to be a consultant. So, yeah, my business really suffered during that time, lost a lot of work and ended up moving up to Perth just to try and find work because there was no jobs for viticulturists. Everyone was staying in their roles and, battening down the hatches, I suppose. And just, ended up doing work in more sort of the trade and distribution side of things, which it wasn't my passion area, but I'm really glad I did it because I feel that I started off in production. I've seen the trade side of things. And then when I moved back from Perth down here, I ended up more in roles where I was looking after direct to consumer and business management. So, in my early 50s, I'm feel very grateful to say that I have worked in different roles that have led me to understand all the facets of the industry. I've still got so much to learn, but it gives you that unique perspective of how to sell B2B, direct to consumer, export markets, but always, always, always bringing the production side into the story. And I think that's critical to my career and whatever I do with my career is I just, you can get all caught up in the technical side of wine judging and wine shows and people wanting to learn about all the ins and outs. But I think you've just always got to go back to the vineyard. And that's where I like to go back to whatever role I'm in.
I read something that you wrote which said, when I retire one day, my goal is to say with confidence that I've worked within most areas of the wine industry and have maintained the passion for wine that got me started on this career path in the first place. And I love that because I think there are so many facets of our industry. And perhaps when you first get involved, you don't know all those different elements. And every time you learn something more about them, you do become a better individual that has more on offer for the industry, don't you?
Yeah. But, I mean, if I can sort of get on my soapbox a bit, I don't think the people out in the vineyards, the viticulturists, the vineyard managers, I don't think they get enough, accolades, receive enough accolades for what their contribution is. It's every little thing that you do out in the vineyard, what you apply to the soil, how you manage the vines, how much water you put on there. Every action out there all year has that impact on what you're enjoying in the glass. The winemaker takes the raw product, and I know that we've all heard this a million times before, but lest we forget. I just think I've been to so many, gala lunches and wine show dinners and things like that where the winemaker comes up and collects the trophy and thanks everyone. I'm like, where's the viticulturist? That was a joint effort. And yeah, sorry, I'm preaching a bit here, but I do think that they need a bit more acknowledgement on their contribution.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard yakka out there.
It's very true. And it's a bit like, those roles we see in restaurants too, of the chefs and the sommeliers, and, it all operates because there's the cleaners and all these other people that absolutely are integral. And like you said, I think it's interesting in wine shows. Someone from Margaret River once mentioned to me, we've done 3 days of wine judging and no one's mentioned the vineyard. We haven't spoken once about the vineyard or where this might be from. We just keep talking about, and I thought that's so true. And we do get caught up in that.
It's not uncommon. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a vineyard scenario, the chef might win an award for his dishes, but what about all the suppliers that gave him those world-class ingredients? You can't make a world-class dish without world-class ingredients. And yes, he manipulated them, he cooked them, he prepared them, and that's what the winemaker does. But those ingredients are what shone in the dish at the end of the day. No matter how much you finesse it, no matter what you do to it, those ingredients won the award. So it's just something that I do whenever I get the opportunity. I do.
I think it's really important, and I'm really glad that you brought it up. I've got a question for you, because we sometimes, I think, forget about that, there's been a global financial crisis before in the world, and that, we are going through some economic tough times now. With all the information that you have, with all the roles that you've had now, what's your advice to people that are in the wine industry right now that are doing some tough times in terms of trying to sell their wine? What can they be doing more?
That's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is don't be reactive. I remember back in the GFC, and I was at the time the president of the Margaret River Wine Association. This is back when they had presidents and vice presidents. They now have a CEO and a chair. And people were pulling vines out of the ground left and right down here in Margaret River. They pulling out Chardonnay vines. And I remember coming and being interviewed by the local television, and they said, what advice would you give vineyard owners in the current climate? And I said, don't pull out your Chardonnay. I said, pull out that Merlot all you like, because I think some of the Merlot clones we have here aren't that great. But I said, please don't pull out the Chardonnay. I said, this is 20 years ago. I said, it's our hero varietal, and people still pulled it out. And now there's a shortage of Margaret River Chardonnay. I think just keep your cool and try not to react. Think about the fact that things are always cyclical. They go in waves, peaks and troughs. And I know a lot of people are regretting doing that years ago, pulling gin Chardonnay out of the ground. So it's just sort of holding fast. And I think really focusing on what you do best, trying not to follow trends, trying not to grow too quickly. I mean, we've just opened a new venue in March. It's only been open for 3 months. And, I think there's a lot of nervousness about how it's going to perform. But I'm determined to just do it slowly, do it well, get our reputation established, and not try to go too big too quickly and see the wheels come off. But things will get better, things will get better. You've still got to focus on producing the best that you can for when things improve.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get to, you moving to Margaret River and to Overstory. So tell me, and to Wayfinder, of course, but tell me a little bit about the decision of moving to Margaret and why you absolutely love it so much.
Well, you mentioned the phrase full circle before, that people grow up in the country, generally come back to the country. For me, the full circle was when I was working at Beecroft Vintage Cellars back as an art student. I remember back then having a Vas Felix masterclass. And I can't even remember because I'm really a lot younger then, but I can't remember who came over and did the masterclass. But we had all these people come along to it, and we had back vintages of Vas Felix Cabernet. And I remember just loving everything about it. And then I became fascinated with Margaret River wine while I was working at Beecroft Cellars. So any time that there was a Margaret River wine there, I'd buy it with my staff discount and take it home and enjoy it. So when I decided to come back to Australia, I thought, which region would I love to work in? Not having been to WA ever before. And I thought Margaret River is it. And I remember arriving in Perth, getting my little hire car, driving down, and it was the time of the year when all the arum lilies, which I've since found out are a massive pest in the area, but I was driving down Caves Road. There are arum lilies just sprouting up on the sides of the road, and I drove past Cullens and Vas Felix. I was driving down Caves Road, and I literally just started, this is going to sound really soppy, but I started crying with happiness. I was like, I'm here, I'm in Margaret River. So, yeah, that's kind of what brought me here, and I still love it. I still love everything about Margaret River region. I really do.
I am the biggest sook who I like cry over commercials, and I was notoriously known for, if I served nice guests, I would often tear up at a table, and so I'm the biggest sook. So you know.
I'm the same. I can be I can be watching something on TV and I cry very easily. I'm a bit of a sookie. I think that's all right. Nothing wrong with that.
No, and I think that we probably don't talk about it enough to let things affect you, and I feel the same way. When I start driving down from Perth and I start seeing all the grass trees, it has a visceral effect on me where I actually am like, oh, I'm here. And I do truly think you live in one of the most special places. And the fact that it produces such exceptional wine is kind of second to the fact that it is just a magnificent place to live.
Yeah, bonus all around.
So tell me a little bit about, you've had your experience in all of that sales and marketing roles. Tell me a bit about how Overstory has come up.
I knew Paul McArdle, our CEO, from quite a number of years ago. Both worked at Must Wine Bar, which was an institution in Perth for a long time with Russell Blakey. So I had a short stint there, and I met Paul, and we got along really well. He was in contact with me when I was between jobs and mentioned that he needed a bit of help because there was just so many projects on the radar with Overstory. So I was very pleased to come on board. So Overstory is the parent company of 2 vineyard locations. We have Wayfinder here in Margaret River, just based out in Quaremup, not far from the Howard Park Vineyard. And we also have Small Wonder, which is in the Tamar Valley in Tasmania. So I'm now sort of heading up the projects of getting ready to launch. We're basically building a restaurant and cellar door over in Tas, and the same here in Margaret River as part of our winery construction project. So I just look ahead to those projects and think, wow, what a privilege to be part of it. You don't often get that opportunity to join a business when it's in this stage. I've worked for a number of wine businesses before that are very well established, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working for those businesses, but you're not at that sort of stage where you can have an influence on how it all unfolds as part of the team. So it's really exciting what's ahead for us. We're building a winery into a turkey nest dam here in Margaret River. So the civil works, so a turkey nest dam. So it comes out the side of a hill. So it's empty. We've had a bit of rain, so it's got a little bit of water in the moment. But the idea is that the winery is built into a hill so that when the grapes come into the receival area at the top of the hill. It's all gravity fed. It's a pretty innovative design. There's been multiple delays because of COVID and then post-COVID price hikes in construction, but we've broken ground just a few weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago. There's lots of machinery and equipment out on the property, getting all the civil earthworks started, and there'll be a cellar door as part of that winery. And the idea is that it's going to be a very immersive experience where you can have tours throughout the winery. When you're in the cellar door, there's actually a massive big window into the barrel room. We really want people to see behind the scenes. So I'm looking forward to overseeing all that when it comes to fruition. Not sure exactly of the completion date, probably 18 to 24 months because it's quite a big project. And then the Small Wonder project over in Tasmania will be finished by November next year.
Wow. Well, already Small Wonder is, doing some amazing stuff with their sparkling. Wayfinder in the restaurant in Dunsborough, I had the privilege of dining at recently, and it is sensational. It has such a good vibe. Like, people are happy. You can see all the diners are like, I'm so stoked to be here. There's good energy in the place. The staff are wonderful. The food is delightful. Like, it just seems to be that these guys know what they're doing. I mean, you seem to be the hire of the century. Not only do they get somebody that knows the ins and outs, but they also have their own viticulturist. Like, how
Look, we've got great staff, and I can't take all the credit for that. Rachel Whitrow, who has since moved on to another project with a different brand, had a huge part of hiring all those great people in there. Rachel and I worked very closely together, but they're fantastic to work with. I think the recipe really is, we do a lot of staff training. Every time we've got a new wine, we sit down and taste it. But I just think happy staff equals happy service. And it's the same in the kitchen. Like, sometimes the chefs get a bit on each other's nerves. We've got a tiny little kitchen, as you saw. And so we have to sit down and have our verbal, to and fro to make sure everyone's on friendly terms. Because I think if everyone's pretty good culturally in a business, things just seem to go well. Yes, you've got to hit the right point with your dishes and your wine service and things like that. But if the products are good, you've got to have happy people. So I think that's what it is. We all get along so well. I sort of treat all the girls like I'm their mum. A lot of them are from overseas and are probably a bit homesick. And I think we're just a really happy team, and I think that comes across to people that come and dine there and enjoy wine tastings at the cellar door. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does. One thing I'd always think about restaurants too is that, everyone's usually there for the same reason. Like, when you get to a certain level of restaurants, is in that the front of house are inspired by what they do, the back of house love what they do. And if you can share that commonality of, hey, you know what's inspiring me or what's really cool at the moment, and the chefs talk about produce they're getting, and then the front of house are like, we're talking about pouring this wine and this is why we love it. You've got this commonality of the people are in this area because they're all inspired by similar things. And I think that you can kind of see when someone like, the waitress that served us, she loved talking about the food. She loved what was happening there, and you could see the pleasure and the pride that she had.
I think that's the critical part, is connecting. Often you'll see in production that the vineyard side of things and the winery side of things, there can be a disconnection there. So, unifying those teams, making sure that they're working together is critical. But the same goes for the restaurant. The kitchen team and the front of house team need to feel like they're working together.
Leah, what are you most proud of that you've achieved in your career?
That's a really tricky question. What am I most proud of? Proud of in terms of what I've achieved, or proud of in terms of what I've been involved in? I don't know. That's proud of in what I've achieved. I think I'm probably most proud of the collaborative work that I've done in profiling the soils of the Margaret River region. So back in 2007 when I was working for AHA Viticulture, I had the opportunity to be the principal author of a project, government project run by the Grape and Wine Research Development Commission, profiling the soils and climate and viticulture practice of the Margaret River region. And what an amazing time that was. I actually had the opportunity to travel around the region and dig soil pits in vineyards. So we dug pits about 500 mil out from the trunk of the vine, and wrote a 80-page treatise on the soils of Margaret River with the help of DPIRD, so Department of Primary Industry Resources and Industries, or whatever the acronym is. But I'm really proud of that work because it's led on to other opportunities over the last 20 years to be involved in writing about the soils of the Margaret River region. Even more recently, the Margaret River Region Toolkit, which was put out by the local association, spearheaded by the CEO, Amanda Whiteland. I got to contribute to that with copywriting on the soil and climate sections. So yeah, probably proud about helping growers in the region, as well as people out there in the industry or globally, people who are interested in it, understand the unique soils of the region. I'm always going to be proud of being part of that.
Leah, we all always like to know a little bit more about your palate. So if you could only drink 3 beverages for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
Whoa. Jeez. Well, I've got to throw a cocktail in there. I'm going to mention wine, of course, but cocktail-wise, I'd probably say a Negroni because I like the bitterness of it. My palate does actually enjoy that bitter sort of flavour profile, which I know is not for everyone. In terms of wine, I mean, I do love my beer, but if I was on death row for any reason and they asked me which glass of wine I'd like to drink, it'd probably be a Pinot. It'd have to be a Pinot. I just love Pinot Noir. I love it in the vineyard. It's a tricky little bastard to grow. It's tricky in the winery. And I think because of my background, when you actually sit there and enjoy a good Pinot, you appreciate how hard it was to get there. And the third drink that I would like to enjoy, again, it's a wine, but I am a Chardonnay girl through and through. I love it in its various forms. I think it's a real chameleon of a varietal. I love its flexibility, its range. You know, if it was a singer, it would have the best range, I think, you know, from right down in, you know, the lowest tones to a soprano. You know, I love Chardonnay. So, yeah, I hope that's a sufficient answer.
Absolutely. I happily would love to sit down and have a drink with you anytime, but with those 3 options, I definitely would be having more than a good time. It'd be a bloody riot.
Same goes for me, Shanteh. I loved sitting next to you at the dinner at Wayfinder. I think the first question I asked you was, should I get a fringe cut into my hair? And we both started laughing and you told me no. And thankfully I took your advice. I didn't get a fringe, but I have chopped my hair a lot shorter. But you're an awesome person. You're so warm. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And your haircut does look fabulous, I have to admit. And that night I wasn't even drinking, so I have to say we have to have a do-over, a couple more drinks together. Thank you, Leah. You're an absolute legend, and I'm really glad I've got to meet you.
Same here. Have a good one.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.